Welcome. This is an audio experience with Maximizing Moments with Milton.
All right, are you ready? I am ready. Okay, here we go. If you're ready, I am ready to rock and roll.
All right, you ready?
I'm ready.
All right, well, let's rock and roll.
Okay.
Hey Maximizers, thank you for joining me on this 2-in-1 episode where I interview special people across this country and even the world to give you a bird's eye view into some of the things that are hot and going on in our country and in your lives today. And so on the show today, on this episode of 2-in-1, we have Amy Waninger, who is a CEO of Lead at Any Level LLC. She works with organizations that want to build diverse leadership bench strength for a sustainable competitive advantage. She is the author of multiple books, including Network Beyond Bias, Making Diversity a Competitive Advantage for Your Career. Amy is a professional member of National Speakers Association and a ProSci certified change practitioner. Her other credentials include 2 degrees from Indiana University and a world's best mom coffee mug. Would you help me welcome Amy? Amy, how you doing today?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm doing so wonderful today. So excited about this interview today, and I know there's some things we're going to talk about that may cut deep for a lot of people, but I want you to give us some Maximizers context about your life, what led you up to this point in living, and why this is such a passion for you today.
Yeah, so, I grew up in southern Indiana in a very small rural community, and I was an only child. And I always felt like I didn't quite fit in, like I didn't quite belong. Even when I had tons of friends around me, in high school and whatever, I always felt a little different. And, I don't know if that's from being an only child or if it's because I grew up in an area that was largely German Catholic and my family was neither German nor Catholic.
Oh.
I'm not sure really where it comes from, but I always found myself attracted to the people who were different, just a little outside the norm, or, if somebody moved from another place, I found myself fascinated with them. And those were the people that I always ended up being friends with. And when I went to college, I had no idea what people did that went to college. Because I didn't know anybody aside from my teachers and my doctor who had actually graduated from college. So, I just went and studied classes that I thought were interesting, things that I liked. And so here I was, just a white girl from southern Indiana, and I was majoring in African American studies, criminal justice, and I had a minor in sociology and a minor in Spanish.
Wow.
And I ended up not getting the African American Studies degree. Full disclosure, I was a credit short, but and I didn't want to stay a whole other semester for that. But it was just kind of this connecting to this narrative and this story that I'd never been exposed to before about who we are as a country, who we are as a people, how we treat each other, and who gets to tell the story in the first place. And I was kind of exposed to a different perspective than I'd ever had in my life before. And I was so fascinated by that. And so not having any idea what I was going to do with a college degree, I had read somewhere about the ACLU, and I decided, I'll go work for them. That'll be great. And I knew to work for the ACLU, I would have to go to law school. So I started preparing for that. And about the same time I found out how much law school would cost, I also found out what the phrase pro bono meant. And I decided law school wasn't going to be for me. So I graduated with a degree in in criminal justice. And it was, I didn't want to go into law enforcement, which is what most people who, do with that major. So I went back to school. I got a second bachelor's degree in computer science. And I spent the next 20 years working in and around IT and business systems. Then I was working for a rather large company, a Fortune 100 company, and they hired a chief diversity officer. And they started investing in employee resource groups and, started talking about things like belonging at work and inclusion and how do you make people feel welcome. And I thought, wow, you can get paid for that job? I want that job.
Yeah.
But a computer science degree did nothing to prepare me for that job. And so, I thought, well, how am I going to change tracks now that I know that this is an option? because who knew, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I decided to just read everything I could. And I had gone to a conference in 2016, and I really wanted to give something back to the organization that sponsored that conference because it was such a good experience for me. And I really felt like I'd found my people, you know?
Mm.
And I knew that the industry was um, struggling with diversity initiatives and struggling with a talent shortage. And I thought, well, I would like to do something. I would like to speak at this conference next year. And I'd like to give some tips for people on how they can, be champions of diversity and inclusion.
Mm-hmm.
And so I had a couple of bullet points, and the worst thing happened. They accepted my proposal. And I thought, oh my gosh, I got to come up with an hour's worth of content. So,
I
so I
understand.
did. And as I was putting together what I wanted to talk about, and keep in mind, this is a group where, they're all insurance professionals, and they could be anywhere from, people who are handling auto claims from inside the company to, you know, executives to people who own their own agencies. I mean, it could just be anywhere along, the value chain of insurance. It could be anywhere in terms of the hierarchy or tenure of someone's career. And I thought, what am I going to talk about that's going to be relevant to all of these people? And I decided, well, everybody needs a good network. So I'm going to talk about that. We're better for us as professionals to demonstrate our commitment to diversity than our own networks.
Mm.
And so I created, I was kind of playing with this idea, and these words started popping up off the page. I do a lot of word games, um, and these acronyms started jumping up at me. And one of them was CHAMP. And I thought, ooh, network like a champ. That's a good title. That sticks.
Mm-hmm.
And so I started playing with that. And CHAMP became the acronym for the 5 critical connections you need in your career. And it's a measure of the depth of your network. And then I came up with another axis to this tool, and that's the word ignore, spelled with 2 G's. What perspectives does your network ignore? And that became the measure of breadth of your network.
Hmm.
And I thought, oh, this is so cool. I'm going to take my own test. And I did. And I was horrified
Oh.
by what I saw. I had been day in, day out championing all of the diversity initiatives that my employer had laid out. I had been recruiting people for these initiatives, and still my network was overwhelmingly white, overwhelmingly American, overwhelmingly female.
Mm.
And I thought, that's not okay. I need to do better.
Wow.
So I changed where I showed up. I changed which meetings I went to. I changed, who I sat with at lunch and who I talked to and who I mentored and who I asked to mentor me and who I helped and which projects I volunteered for. And I tried to get different perspectives in my network. And when I saw how much that realization changed me, I thought, this is bigger than a conference with a couple hundred people one time. This is something that other people need to know about. And I had been looking for the book for a long time on what can I do about it. Yes, I believe diversity, the need for diversity is real. Yes, I believe that we have a problem of too many people that look the same in most organizations, but I'm just one person, and what can I do about it?
Mm-hmm.
And that book did not exist. And when I realized that I had written that book in my head, I had created the experience that answered that question, I had to write the book and I had to share it.
Right. Right. Can I ask you a question real quick, Amy? So,
Absolutely. That's
and
why I'm here.
thinking about the whole, this is number one. I love what you said about being attracted to different. Some things kind of popped out at me when you talked about being attracted to different, and I think basically in this case right now we're talking about scenario. We're talking about maybe diversity and inclusion. I think for maximizers you have to be. You need to be attracted to different in order to be better, bettering within yourself personally, but also bettering in your community and the world at large. I love when you said that, being tracked different. Looking at your childhood, I mean, obviously your parents, obviously you said weren't German Catholic, but was there anything they instilled in you? More so, and I know you said, when you got to college, it kind of opened your eyes up and you wanted to know more about the world around you versus what you grew up in. But is there anything your parents kind of instilled in you at a young age that kind of led you down this path as well?
Oh, absolutely. My parents were always really supportive of anything that I wanted to try, anything that I wanted to do. Um, and, they always, they really brought me up to respect other people and to not, always be kind, always be generous, always give of yourself, always help somebody in need. And, and my parents just have a remarkable work ethic. I don't know any two people that work harder than them. And so, it was, I think all of those things really kind of combined in me. Sometimes a little latent. I haven't always worked as hard as I have here lately, but I think that all of that comes from when you're young, right? You have to have those seeds planted early, I think, to have a passion about something. And I remember my mom telling me stories of her childhood, and just she grew up very poor, and it just, I always felt like I was so lucky to have what I had, and to be healthy, and to have two parents in the same house, and all of those things. And I remember when I was a kid, I would identify like some, when they would show something, some devastation happening around the world on the nightly news, and I would remember my heart would just go out to these people, and I would think, oh my gosh, if I was born in any other place in time, that could have been me. And I remember thinking that from a very young age. So I'm sure that came from my parents, because I don't think kids come up with that kind of stuff on their own.
They don't. I think you have to be taught. In the environment you're in, you're taught a lot of things, and so whether you pick it up or whether it's verbally taught, but there's things that you pick up and become part of your own life. And thinking about the world that your parents kind of put in front of you, maybe just depositing some really key nuggets in life, wisdom, and then you're talking about right now the leading from when you understand, like, hey, I want to know more about other cultures, other people, and then you went into the criminal justice, and then you went thinking about being a lawyer, and then you got hired on in IT, and then now you're like chief diversity officer. I love that. How can I do that? And so another, your passion was reborn in a sense, coming to corporate America, and talking about inclusion and different topics that come along with diversity. I grew up just quickly. I grew up in African American home. My father grew up in Detroit area, sometimes rough neighborhoods. Grew up around that culture where they considered a quote unquote ghetto, or black community. And when he went off to college in Atlanta to Morehouse, mindset changed, and he wanted to raise his family not in the quote unquote ghetto parts of America. And so he put us me and my brothers in areas where they were majority Caucasian, right, or Asian, and we grew up in that environment more so than anything else. And so I identifying more with the Caucasian, Asian, the maybe non-minority sides of things versus the minority side of things, which created, I'm thankful for it because it allowed me to be more versatile in a lot of different arenas. But at the same time, the question comes to me today, and I hope you can help me answer this, Amy, is, where's the line that goes from being inclusive to exclusive? You're excluding other people, but because you're looking to include certain people. Sometimes I challenge with that, even in my own race and culture. And sometimes I'm thinking, oh gosh, I'm over here, but I want to be over here. How do I bridge the gap? Do you have any wisdom, any coaching for someone that's in that type of position? Like, like I want to include, but I'm also excluding some other people. So, anyways, Anything you can share on that?
Yeah, so I think what you're describing is what some people would call cultural dexterity,
Okay.
where you can easily um, kind of move between groups or between subcultures
Mm-hmm.
and kind of blend in
Yes.
both senses, right? Um, and I have absolutely very little to offer. I'm sorry, in terms of how does one experience blackness in America, because I've never had that experience.
Yeah, true. Okay. No.
So I'm sorry, I can't help you
No.
with that. I could read every book on the topic and would still be clueless, because I don't live in that skin. But I don't think that it's a detriment to be able um, to bridge that gap, right? Because you have that ability to see the world from two perspectives,
Mm-hmm.
because you can be in group, right, in the communities where you grew up, and you can be in group in the communities that maybe look more like you.
Sure.
And then you can help represent the other perspectives as you move into and out of those
The
different
different subgroups.
communities.
Yeah. Okay.
So I think that's a real gift. And I think not enough of us do that. I think not enough of us try to put ourselves in different communities. One of the things that I write about in Network Beyond Bias is go to the conference that's not for you.
Hmm.
Show up somewhere where you are not on the menu, right? Like you're
Sure.
not,
Yeah. Yeah.
I
Yeah.
mean, I love going to conferences, and there'll be a breakout session. For example, I was at an education conference. I'm not involved in higher ed directly, but I was at this higher ed conference, and they had a breakout session for uh, people of color who are seeking tenure.
Mm.
And I thought, ooh, that's a neat topic. I want to go to that. And I'm so sad to say I was the only white person in the room. And I thought, what a tragedy, because here are all these people who are either struggling to get tenure or who are have already gotten there, right? And they didn't see this as relevant to them, and they aren't taking the time to understand. It's a hard process,
Mm.
I'm sure, regardless of who you are. Um, but they didn't take the time to understand how that might be harder for some of their colleagues,
Right. Right.
and how they might be able to, build that case or represent that perspective, from where they sit. And I think that's a missed opportunity. And I know you're all about maximizing moments. I think one of the things that we can do to make the most of the time that we have is look for opportunities to learn about otherness. And whether we're part of the dominant group or at any given point, or part of, some other, less represented group, take some time to learn from a different perspective. There's always someone who has different challenges than you have. Go learn about those and figure out how you can ally with those folks, right?
Yeah. And it's creating empathy within yourself. You can empathize more with the other people. You're like, oh, I get it, because you are placing yourself outside of your comfort zone or outside of your quote unquote norm. And I think that's so key when it comes to you truly maximizing moments in your own life, that you do find yourself in areas where you least expect it. Like I said, not on the menu. I love that. You're not on the menu. And I think that comes from, that now it could be diversity, but it could be financially, it could be,
Yeah.
health. It's like, oh wow, I'm not like these people, but let me get around them. I might be able to learn something, or vice versa, whatever. And so I think that's very important, very key, to that. Let me ask you this right now. Um, hot topic in America. What are some of the top questions right now as you speak and as you coach that you're faced with right now when it comes to diversity? What are some things, really hot things, top things that you're one or two things that you're kind of facing?
So a lot of people say, well, how does this apply to me? What can I do about this? And that's a pretty easy question to answer, because I have an assessment that tells them exactly where they are. And I typically, when I administer the assessment, people take it, they think when they sit down, they're very confident, like I was, right, the first time I took it. And I Is your show G rated?
Yes.
Okay.
It's clean, but yeah.
All right. So I had a guy this week, actually within the last week. I sat down and we had coffee together. I said, "Let me show you this." I was trying to explain to him what it is I do, and I said, "Let me show you this tool that I created." And so I wrote it down for him, and out of 30 different dimensions of diversity in his network, he had one represented, just one. And he said, that really ticks me off. And I said, good, that means you'll change it. And so I think a lot of people don't know what question to ask because they think they're doing just fine. Thank you very much. And it's not until they see that they're not doing as well as they think. And it's always the well-meaning people, right? Because we're all well-meaning people.
Right.
And I always think, man, if the most well-meaning people aren't doing the job, aren't doing the work, who is?
Right.
And the answer is we all need to be. So, I think a lot of people think that it's not about them, but it is about them. It's about all of us. So I think that's the big, message that I want people to get when they hear me talk or, when they read the book, that it's about all of us. In terms of questions I get, like, well, how do I get started? Is a good, is one that people will often ask. Like, like the thought of going to, let's say you're a Black real estate professional, the thought of going to, the Asian American Society of Financial Planners for a meeting is probably not on your calendar, right? But it should be at some point, but maybe you don't start there.
Yeah.
So I always tell people, if you're trying to kind of break through this bubble a little at a time or make your circle just a little bit bigger, start with social media. Who do you follow? Whose books do you read? Whose webcasts do you listen to? Whose podcasts do you listen to? Where are you going for your news or your information or your education?
Right.
And listen to conversations that are happening without you as if you're not there, because you're not there, right? And you don't have to weigh in. You don't have to correct people on their own experience. Just listen.
Right.
And then people say, well, what if I show up and they ask me what I'm doing there? Well, say I'm here to listen.
Right.
And then do it. Just shut up.
Just answer.
Because,
Yeah.
because if you say I'm here to listen and then you do that, there are going to be people in the room who then want to come talk to you.
Yep.
And you're going to learn a lot more by being open, ears open, mouth shut.
Yeah.
So
that's awesome. Thanks, Amy. That's
Sure.
good. I appreciate that. And I know we can talk more and more about this. I probably have more questions. It might have to be a part 2 show. Because I'll have to have you back on and talk more about diversity and the biases we face in America and across the country and the world. But I want to get into our maximizing moment questions, and I know that's something that's our maximizers love to hear. Are you ready for that?
I'm ready.
Very good. Let me ask you the first question, Amy. Give me your favorite quote and explain why and how it helps you.
There, but for the grace of God, go I.
Okay.
And I'm not a religious person at all.
That's fine.
But something about that, I heard that when I was young, very young. And I remember thinking that a lot when I would see someone who was struggling or, someone who was like living through a war. And I would think, wow, that could have been me. If I had been born in another time and place, it's just luck that I'm here where I am and I'm safe. And, if you think about, for me, if I think about that in the context of people who have differences of opinion, of people who, don't look like me, don't think like me, don't sound like me or act like me, or, just that don't have some of the blessings that I have in my life. I mean, it's all luck. And it just, a small twist of fate. And I would be in their shoes.
Awesome. Thanks for answering that, Amy.
Mm-hmm.
Second question. Give me a moment where when looking back, you let slip away and it impacted your life at some level.
Oh, so I think the moments that I let slip away are the moments that I chose not to be brave. When I chose to not go out of my way to do the right thing, because doing nothing was more convenient. And I think what that's done to me, who knows what ripple effects that's had in my life or in other people's lives, but I know the direct effect it's had, and that is to reinforce more of that behavior. I think when you're brave, you become more brave, and when you're cowardly, you become more cowardly.
That's good. I love that. That's a good one. Thanks. Number 3, have you ever had a time where you knew there was more for you to do in life or accomplish, but were in a position or job or career that didn't quite line up with that? How did you maximize that moment?
Oh boy, that's a loaded question. So I've been in that position a few times in my career, and what I try to tell people when I'm mentoring someone in a professional setting, I say, look, always have one foot on solid ground, and then use your other foot to feel the terrain around you. And the best time to look for your next job is when you start this one, because there's always things can turn on a dime, right? I grew up in IT in the early 2000s, and the ground was shifting under me so fast I couldn't keep up. So I got really good at, keeping my resume updated every 6 months, making sure I knew who was working where that liked me and would hire me if I needed something quick. Knowing who I could connect to jobs was really important, because then I knew they would return the favor someday. Build your network when you don't need it. Build your credit when you don't need it, that sort of thing. And just, always have one foot on solid ground while you're searching for something else with the other foot.
That's a good answer. Good answer. Next question. Do you have a story of a time that when maximize the moment was important or meaningful to you?
Oh, absolutely. So, I think going to my first ever conference and looking around and going, I can contribute to this. And finding a way to contribute to it. Now, arguably it was a moment, right, of putting a few bullet points on a page and submitting it, which, there was a pretty good chance it wasn't going to be selected, so the risk wasn't huge.
Yeah.
But recognizing that there was a lot of opportunity there was something bigger that was waiting for me on the other side of that, and it was really a snowball effect. And I just think, man, if I hadn't put those 3 bullet points down on paper, I wouldn't have written 3 books now. I wouldn't have a business. I wouldn't have this amazing network that I have. It all came from just wanting to give something back to a community that I felt a kinship with.
That is amazing. I love that. Just taking action on the small, slightest insight and intuition, inspiration. That's cool. Thank you. Mm-hmm. Next question, Amy, for you. How would you define a maximizing moment?
Oh, a maximizing moment is when you can choose to do nothing or to take a chance. Mm-hmm. And I refer to this, I'm part of an anthology also that's coming out in February. It's called Power Up Superwomen. And in that book, I tell a story about when I just decided I was going to be bold. And it's not one decision that changed my life forever. It's, I'll mark a line in the sand and I'll say, I'm going to be bold. I'm going to do X, and I'm going to make a bold move. And I'll tell somebody exactly that. I'm going to go make a bold move. And I mark it in time that way because it's usually a moment that I'm going to look back on as when things started to get better for me.
That's wisdom. That is wisdom. Good. Now, our maximizers are all about actionable steps. So if you could provide 3 immediate action steps to take for a person to maximize to define a moment in their life, what would that be?
Ooh, 3 steps. Okay, so I'm going to use the 3 steps from these are my 3 steps for overcoming unconscious bias. Mm-hmm. And real quick, unconscious bias are the decisions you make that you don't realize you make because they're so deep in you that you don't even think about them anymore.
Yeah.
Okay? So here's your 3 steps. The first one is put yourself on notice. Notice how you feel in a situation. Notice what thoughts you're having, what values or identities you're protecting with your response. Noticing can completely undo the power that bias has over you. Just making note of it. That's it. Step 2 is to observe the responses of others. Because once you know how you're reacting and why, it's not hard to see that other people are reacting differently. And then you can imagine what are the values or identities or experiences they're protecting with their response. And you can file all those away in your database, in your brain. And the third step is to press your pause button. So literally put your finger on that little divot under your nose. It's called your philtrum. Press your pause button. It keeps your mouth shut long enough for you to think about what's the best response in this situation. It might be your first response, but usually it's not. Usually it's one of those that you filed away from observing other people.
Wow, that's awesome. Put yourself on notice, observe the response of others, and press your pause button.
Yes, sir.
Awesome. Love those 3. That's good ones, Maximizers. Hope you enjoyed that. Now, give me some, you got a couple minutes, Amy. Give us some parting words, some instructions or comments for today.
Okay, so the first thing I will tell you is wherever you are, whoever you are, whatever you do, your network is not as diverse as you think it is. It's not. And I've presented to groups, huge groups, small groups, one-on-one. I would say 99% of the people that I talk to, that I work through this process with, 99% of them are shocked by how much the people around them are just like them. So that's the first thing. Number 2, get out of your comfort zone. Go talk to somebody different. Hold yourself accountable to it. And, of course I'm promoting my books, but I do have books to help with that. And I use every single day, I use a journal that I created called Network Like a Champ, Networking Activity Journal, to record all the conversations that I have with people that I'm networking with. And then I track where do they fit into my network and what perspective do they bring that I don't have. And it's a really easy way to keep myself accountable and to know where I need to be more intentional.
Wow, that's awesome. Thank you so much, Amy. Thank you so much. That was good, exciting today, Maximizers. I've gotten a lot out of today. I've taken a lot of notes and stuff I'm going to include in my life and really take notice of things going on in my own life, and I hope that you do the same. So, Amy, where can we find you? What are you promoting right now? And then you have some books, and where do you want the Maximizers maybe go and support you at?
Well, I'll give you a link to a splash page where they can go and download a free ebook that is 21 Insights for Inclusive Networking. It's some excerpts from my book, Network Beyond Bias. And if you download the ebook, a few days later, you'll get the first 50 pages of my book in your inbox, absolutely free. See if it's something that you might be interested in learning more about. And so I'll give you the link to that. If if you're out driving or as you're listening to this, just go to the show notes. If you just want to jot down my my website, it's lead@anylevel.com, and I am on Twitter, Facebook, and LinkedIn at lead@anylevel or at Amy C. Waninger, which is harder to spell. So lead at any level.
Lead at any level. Awesome. You got that, Maximizers, and we'll place that in our show notes as well, so you can click on that link as well. Thank you so much for your time, Amy. You've been wonderful today. I loved having you on the show. We're definitely going to do this again because I think there's so much more to uncover, a little bit more deeper in the whole diversity, the bias, the inclusion piece of our own living, and how that shapes and forms us to help us maximize any given moment in our life towards success. So thank you so much, Amy, for your time, Maximizers. I really do hope you got a lot out of this. If you do like it and you think it's worth the share, please share it in your social media streams and wherever you find this podcast and show. Until next time, everyone, God bless you. Thank you, Amy.
Thank you.